When Donald Trump threatened to ignite a trade war with Canada, he probably expected Ottawa to fold. What he wasn't expecting was Chrystia Freeland. In a fiery response that sent shockwaves around the globe, Canada's former finance minister didn't just push back. She drew a line in the sand, laying out a playbook on how to fight back. We're breaking down her stunning strategy, the high-stakes economic showdown it triggered, and how Canada decided it was done being pushed around. The moment Donald Trump returned to the White House in 2025, the clock started ticking for Canada. It wasn't a question of if a trade battle would start, but when. By early March, the threats became very real. The Trump administration announced its plan for a full frontal economic assault, with tariffs going into effect on March 4, 2025. We're not talking small numbers here. The plan was to impose crushing 25% tariffs on most Canadian goods, with a 10% tariff on energy. This was an economic shockwave that threatened countless jobs on both sides of the border. But this wasn't just about economics. The rhetoric from Washington was aimed at the heart of Canadian sovereignty. Trump's repeated comments about Canada becoming the 51st state were initially dismissed, but soon it was clear the joke was over. It was seen as a deliberate tactic to sow chaos. One Canadian member of Parliament, Charlie Angus, even called the combination of tariffs and rhetoric an act of war. He stated, "When you say that someone doesn't have a right to have a country, that's an act of war. When you rip up, arbitrarily, trade agreements and threaten to break a country, that's an act of war." The threat was no longer abstract. It was a clear and present danger to Canada's economy and its independence. The nation held its breath, waiting for a response. That's when one of Canada's most prominent voices, Chrystia Freeland, stepped forward with a plan, and it had nothing to do with backing down. As Canada stared down the barrel of economic chaos, Chrystia Freeland delivered a masterclass in strategic defiance. In a series of powerful speeches and interviews in early 2025, she laid out a playbook for how to handle this kind of aggressive maneuvering. Her central message was simple: don't be intimidated. Speaking at a press conference at a Stelco steel factory in Hamilton on March 3, 2025, she made her philosophy crystal clear. "The critical thing right now is for us not to be intimidated," she said. "The way that President Trump negotiates is by creating maximum chaos and maximum intimidation. We need to be united, strong, and smart." This wasn't just tough talk. It was a strategy based on her experience negotiating with the Trump administration. Freeland argued that any sign of weakness would be an invitation for him to push even harder. So, what was the plan? Retaliation. But not just any retaliation. Freeland called for a response that was surgical and targeted. She championed a dollar-for-dollar counterpunch. The goal wasn't random damage, but to create maximum pain for the specific people and businesses with the most influence on Donald Trump. She called on the government to immediately publish a massive retaliation list as a preemptive strike, showing the United States exactly what was at stake. U.S. exporters need to worry whether their businesses will be the ones we hit, she said. And she named names. The most headline-grabbing proposal? 100% tariff on all Teslas. This was the perfect example of her surgical approach. Target a high-profile company whose pain would be felt directly in the circles of power. She also pointed to other key groups, like Wisconsin dairy farmers. This wasn't just a trade dispute, it was psychological warfare, designed to make the trade war, in her words, self-mutilating for the U.S. and turn up the political pressure from within. Freeland's defiant message didn't just echo in Parliament. It ignited a fire across the country. A wave of patriotism and consumer activism swept through Canada. Polling from the Angus Reid Institute in early March 2025 showed that Canadians were feeling angry and betrayed, but not defeated. Support for strong retaliatory measures surged, with 70% of Canadians backing targeted tariffs on key U.S. imports. An Ipsos poll found that 2/3 of Canadians said they would try to avoid buying U.S.-made goods. This wasn't a government-led boycott. It was a grassroots movement of economic defiance, and it seems Freeland's strategy had an impact in Washington. The credible threat of surgical, painful retaliation created real pressure. While the trade war began on March 4th, there were signs of hesitation. Just 2 days later, on March 6th, the Trump administration announced exceptions for some products, a move that came after American industries began voicing their opposition. It was a validation of Freeland's core argument. The path to de-escalation wasn't through weakness, but through showing the real consequences of American actions. But Freeland's vision went beyond a one-on-one fight. She knew Canada couldn't stand alone, calling on other countries facing similar threats to join Canada in a coalition. She argued that if an ally like Canada could be bullied, it would only embolden this aggressive approach elsewhere. It was a call to arms for the world's democracies to stand together. This battle for Canadian sovereignty is far from over. But in the face of an unprecedented economic threat in early 2025, Chrystia Freeland refused to let Canada be intimidated. She met chaos with resolve and threats with a credible plan. The surge in Canadian patriotism and the eventual hesitation from Washington showed this strategy had a real impact. It was a moment that stunned the world and reminded everyone that Canada, as she put it, is not for sale. If you believe in standing up to this kind of pressure with strength and strategy, hit that subscribe button for more independent analysis. And share this video to show the playbook for how to stand firm has already been written.